Oh, hi, everybody. Can you all hear me? I'm trying something new tonight. We got some new microphones here at Good Natured World headquarters, and supposedly the quality is a little bit better. I
hear you.
You can hear me okay? Okay, there was a little circle that said connecting to audio. But it looks
Sound great.
Well, then let's go for it. Let's quit talking about dry topics that I know nothing about and go on to some other things that, well, I might not know anything about them either, but at least there's pretty pictures to accompany them. Gonna go ahead and start our screen share tonight. Let's pick the slideshow up. You know what? I'm not gonna start yet because I wanna make sure the audio works with this. We've got some cool sounds we're gonna share with you this evening. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so if you had a chance, and even if you didn't have a chance to read last week's column, we are going to talk about red-headed woodpeckers. You know, and it was kind of funny. I wrote about them in a way that I so often do. I look back over my my photo memories and also my columns seasonally to see you know, what might be happening. And I always do this about 2 weeks in advance of what's actually going to be happening. And I was really keeping my fingers crossed that the redheads would be showing up about the time this article ran. And it actually sounds like they are. I've gotten several emails, a couple of phone calls, a few photos that have come in, and they are here. Now, are they going to stay here? That kind of depends. We do have a very few areas in this area that they find suitable for nesting. Let me show you a little bit what our redheads are after. They are an animal, they're a woodpecker that prefers open woods, or what we might call a savanna type of habitat. This is a little gradient. Those of you that have taken our King County Certified Naturalist course might be familiar with this diagram. This is a gradient of moisture and light as it concerns the forest floor. As you get over here to the right, you see the trees are densely they're growing very close together. There's not much light that reaches the forest floor. That sort of canopy cover, when you're looking at, say, you know, 50, 60, 75% canopy cover, then you're looking at something we would call a forest. If the trees are a little bit more widely spaced, we would call it a woodland. And actually, technically speaking, much of the wooded areas here in King County would qualify as woodlands, not forests, even though we have a forest preserve. And then in a very few areas, we have what we would call savanna habitat, which is where the trees are spaced even farther apart. I do apologize, in the print version, if you read the King County Chronicle, I think there I'd said that if the trees are 50%, the canopy cover is 50% or less. And then that was the USDA's, the Forest Service definition. Locally, the savanna definition, we go a little bit more spread out with a 30% canopy cover. So anyway, there might be a discrepancy depending on where you read the article, but the point is these guys, redheads, do not like to live in areas where the trees are growing very close together. They like a nice open canopy, much like what we would see in a savanna. Now we have a savanna at Hickory Knolls, right behind our building. We've got the oaks spaced a fair distance apart. In fact, it's a little bit easier to say in this winter shot. You can see just how much of the canopy is open here and how much light is able to pass through. This sort of habitat you'd think might be agreeable or appropriate for the red-headed woodpeckers. We have yet to have a pair nest in this particular area. I don't know if we're just not on their radar. Maybe historically they haven't stopped here, or maybe they have yet to discover it. But no redheads here that we've been able to see, not for more than a couple of days. Here, this is Bluff Spring Fen. This is a Cook County Forest Preserve that is adjacent to the Bluff City Cemetery up in Elgin. And this is kind of true savanna and a sort of man-made savanna right next to each other. The oak trees that dot this beautiful old cemetery are spaced widely apart. And then those of you who've been to Bluff Spring Fen know that you enter the Fen property through the cemetery. So what's changing, you'll see in this picture, is the what's on the ground. We're transitioning from turf grass there in the cemetery to the widely spaced oak trees, and then the prairie plants that are underneath the oaks in the fen. Quite a bit of the fen. There is a fen is defined as a wetland that has alkaline water bubbling up through the limestone bedrock that we have in this area. And there is a part of that preserve that's a fen, but there's also there's some glacial formations there. It's not all wetland. So there's a lot of oak trees that are doing quite nicely there. And there are records of red-headed woodpeckers nesting at Bluff Spring Fen. Now, this is an area that's savanna-like. This is down at Fabian. This is on the west side, just off of Route 31. You can see it appeals to the Canada geese. This is mostly bur oaks in this particular area. I don't know a lot about the history, if maybe these oaks were planted. I would imagine some of them sprung up from older trees, but I don't know if Colonel Fabian played a role in this particular grouping of oak trees at Fabian Forest Preserve. But you can see here too, underneath, rather than the prairie plants that would identify a natural savanna, this one has the turf grass underneath. I don't know if there's any redheads that have been nesting there. Haven't heard about any, but this would be the sort of tree spacing that this bird would find attractive. And then here, now this doesn't really look at all like a savanna, especially with the trees that have been planted recently, but this is McCullough Park down in Aurora. And this is where I had my most engaging red-headed woodpecker encounter several years ago. If you go through McCullough Park, there are some old oak trees that are spaced throughout the turf grass. If you go along the Fox River, there's a couple of oak trees as well that are quite old, and more important, have some dead wood in the in amongst the branches, some snags that I think are what these birds find the most attractive. This particular property, though, does have a few wooden phone poles left, and that's actually where I saw the red-headed woodpecker family. It was on this telephone pole by this particular parking lot. So telephone poles, they have a quality that red-headed woodpeckers are somewhat drawn to, and that is it's dead wood and it doesn't have any bark on it. That's something that when they're choosing to make their nests, that's what they most often will prefer when they're excavating their nest cavities. Now look at this bird. Isn't it just the most gorgeous thing? Look at that red head. There is really no mistaking. I know a lot of times people will call a red-bellied woodpecker a redhead. Sometimes you'll even see the little patch of red on a male downy woodpecker, and they'll say, oh, it's a red-headed woodpecker. Yeah, it's a woodpecker with red on its head, but these guys, there's really no mistaking it. And both the males and the females have this wonderfully deep red on the head, just like their head was dunked in a bucket of red paint. They share a lot of similarities with some of the other woodpeckers in the family. Now, they are in the genus Melanurpes, which they share with red-bellied woodpeckers in our area. There's a couple of characteristics that they have in common with them. Both of those woodpecker species are food cachers or stashers. However, the red-bellied woodpecker is a little less inclined to do it, or they don't do it to the degree that the red-headed woodpecker does. I like this photo on the right, whoops, because it shows us a characteristic that many woodpeckers share, these stiff tail feathers. Every once in a while, you might find a feather like this laying on the floor in the woods, or in this case, maybe in a savanna. But it's these, the spine of these feathers is really, really stiff. And it's something you can see here on the left, the bird uses to brace itself against the tree, as it's, whether it's foraging or poking about, looking for a place to excavate. So look at all these different woodpecker shots. I gathered these from one of our royalty-free websites that we go to for bird photos. These are all red-headed woodpeckers, and they are all on pieces of dead wood. That, I think, is one of the limiting factors for this species. We don't have a lot of savannas, and we don't have a lot of dead wood that's available to them. Our instinct when we're maintaining our yards is to get rid of something that's dead. And a lot of public agencies have a responsibility to keep their properties safe. So if there's some dead limbs that could perhaps fall on someone, especially like, these last few days have been so windy, dead wood can be a real liability. So it doesn't often get to stay around in public areas either. So, but it's something that these birds really seek out when they're building their nests. Now here we've got the picture on the left shows the bird excavating a hole in the dead wood that is devoid of bark, which is their preferred nesting sites. And on the right, we have John James Audubon's depiction of the red-headed woodpecker. And again, there's a tree that is mostly devoid of bark. It also shows two other characteristics that kind of differentiate this bird from others. One is it gathers a lot of fruit and a lot of nuts. And it caches them not only in the nuts aren't only cached as whole bits, but they will also break them apart and cache small bits of nuts too. And they'll stick them in the grooves in wood. Sometimes they'll carve little excavations that they'll shove bits of food into. The caching over winter, we don't often see around here because this bird does move slightly as it goes through the seasons. Let's go ahead here. We'll come back to that picture in a minute. This is on the left-hand side. That's the breeding bird survey. And you can see even in the most densely populated areas, areas of most dense red-headed woodpecker population, it's not all that this is not a terribly common bird anymore, even though it's the most iconic looking of our red-headed woodpecker of our woodpeckers. The population just isn't all that high, and there's just a ever so slight of a shift when you compare these two maps together. So breeding bird survey, that's where they would be in the warmer weather months, and then over here on the left, this is where they go to in the cooler weather months. A lot of that caching of nuts and seeds would occur in their wintering habitat, as opposed to summertime. They might cache a little bit, but they're so busy though raising their kids, they don't have quite as much time to be doing that behavior. Plus food is generally more plentiful. Now, if we go back to this slide, this is another behavior that kind of differentiates the red-headed woodpecker from others in that family. They are pretty adept at catching insects on the fly. Their tongue is actually a little bit different. Oftentimes when we're interpreting woodpeckers, we'll talk about the bristly brush-like structure at the end of the tongue, and how the tongue is super long and they can stick that tongue in a hole that they've excavated, or like in the case of flickers, they can stick that tongue down an anthill and come out with a mouthful of ants. The red-headed woodpecker's tongue is a little bit different. It doesn't have a brush. It's more like little hairs on the end of it. And it's also not quite as long. So it's not so great maybe at slurping bugs out of tunnels, but it is very good at being able to capture birds on the fly. So a behavior we don't often see amongst our woodpeckers, but one that the red-headed woodpecker is apt to do. It could also help explain their preference for open woods. It's a lot easier to catch an insect on the fly in an open area than it is in a densely packed woods or forest. Now, I mentioned a couple of times, these birds are not that common. You know, when the U.S. Postal Service talks about how unusual a bird is, then you know this is a thing. This bird was honored back in the 1990s. They even made note when they issued this stamp that it used to be a common sight, but has decreased in numbers due to habitat loss. So it's a bird that a lot of agencies in the eastern United States are working to try and bring back managing oak woodlands, trying to get around this, having to keep the oak safe by getting rid of the dead wood while leaving some for them to nest in. That's one thing they're wrestling with. Just keeping our savannas, bringing those back is another priority, I know, especially for our agencies in this area. So let's hope that someday we'll be able to see red-headed woodpeckers, not just when they're pushing through here, but that we'll hear in the future more and more of them staying around to nest here in the summer. Now, I mentioned that I'd gotten a few photos. In fact, when I wrote the column, I think I said what's black and white and red all over. I, of course, was in my mind picturing only the red-headed woodpecker, but I did get these two photos too. People thought both of these photos came from people who weren't sure what exactly they were looking at, but they thought, well, they're black and white and red all over. Maybe these are some strange exotic form of a woodpecker. They do have a large bill. These, however, are male rose-breasted grosbeaks. Keep your eye out for these guys. They just started showing up here in the last couple of days, and the females will be following shortly. Picture a bird that has the same giant bill, but instead of the black and white and red, they're mostly brown all over with a prominent white line above the eye. Bigger than a sparrow, but your brain might want to say, wow, that is a really big sparrow. Look at the bill too, because sometimes female red-winged blackbirds are also called giant sparrows, but be on the lookout for grosbeaks as they are moving through as well. Now, this is a fun little video. You might recognize this particular area. This is Fearsome Creek Fen here in St. Charles, and this was a video that was taken the other day by our restoration ecologist, Ryan Solomon. This is a pair of Sandhill cranes feeling kind of frisky. The other bird's going to respond here in just a second. There we go. Ryan was doing some restoration work at the fen when he happened to witness this little courtship ritual. What was most exciting to him was that this area has undergone some really intense restoration. If you visited Fearsome Creek Fen, you'll know that if you've visited it over time, you know that it's fought several battles. Our restoration crew has helped it fight these battles. A long time ago, it was pretty much covered with reed canary grass, which is a very tough invader of wetlands. It spreads, it makes huge amounts of seeds. It spreads underneath the ground. It makes these impenetrable masses of grasses, and it becomes kind of a monoculture. The Park District received some grant money to do some work in removing the reed canary grass and kind of created a blank slate at Fearsome Creek Fen. But before we were able to get it get a more diverse community reestablished, a whole lot of cattails, primarily the narrow-leaf cattail, or the more invasive of the species in this area, moved in, and we all of a sudden had a fen that was covered in cattails. Well, you can see in this picture that there's more restoration going on. Those cattails are slowly but surely falling for more diverse types of wetland plants. And lo and behold, the cranes have noticed, and they came and had a little bit of a, I think they were just on a date. I do not believe they're nesting at Fearsome Creek Fen, but they are certainly finding this the stage much to their liking. So we're going to keep an eye on that, see what other birds are attracted to the restoration efforts at Fearsome. So speaking of restoration, this is a really interesting flower, and you know, I've been working in this field now for about 20 years, a little over 20 years actually, and every year we talk about our spring, the woodland wildflowers, the spring ephemerals, and how they come and they go. They want to come up in the woods and bloom, and then set their seeds before those leaves we were talking about earlier, that canopy cover fills in and the sunlight starts to be diminished. So hepatica and bloodroot and trillium, there's all these different types of woodland wildflowers. And they're kind of like old friends. I always look forward to seeing them every year. Well, last week we hosted a wildflower walk at Norris Woods, and in getting ready for that walk, what do we find but this plant here? We had to work a little bit to identify it because it's not very common, and it's not listed in any of the spring ephemeral references that we had. It's called American Stoneseed, or American Gromwell. Lithospermum latifolium is the Latin name for it. It's a plant that you can see here. This is from the Illinois Wildflowers website. It's not terribly common throughout the state, and they even say that in the text. They say that it's often overlooked in plant surveys because it's not very showy. Many field guides have just plain left it out. It's actually, though, the sign of it's a very conservative plant. It's very picky about where it chooses to grow, and it is often found along rivers, which now this at Norris Woods, this was not growing close to the river, but Norris Woods is situated along the Fox River. It also likes the soils in rich deciduous woodlands, which Norris Woods is. Now, I was curious as to where this plant came from. There were several of them sprinkled along one of the paths at Norris Woods. And so I asked Ryan, I said, so were you guys spreading seed there? And he said, no. So this plant actually found the growing conditions to its liking. Where it's growing at is an area where a number of maples were cleared out a few years back. So again, the wooded areas here in Kane County tend to be woodlands, not forests. So slightly more open forest canopy, opening that canopy up to let more light down to the forest floor, the woodland floor, gave this plant, American Stoneseed, just what it was looking for. Now it's in the same family as Virginia bluebells, and it shares a quality with them. Both bluebells and American Stoneseed, they've got these clusters of blossoms, but they don't all bloom at once. And that's the plant kind of then allows a sequence of pollinators to come in and visit those flowers. We say just about every week at this time of year, a flower's purpose is to form a seed. And you remember this plant's, one of its common names is American Stoneseed. This is what forms where those little yellow blossoms are on the plant. It's a very hard coated seed. And it's a very small too, up to 1/8 of an inch long. So it's a tiny little seed. This is from the Minnesota Wildflowers website showing it. It's actually kind of hard to find a lot of information about American stoneseed, but it is something I'd encourage you to keep an eye out for to see if it's growing in any other rich woodlands in this area. To identify it, let me take these pictures away here for a minute. One of the things we noticed immediately about this plant were these deep, the veins here, they're deeply indented on the top of the leaf, and then they stand out on the underside of the leaf. So the veins are very prominent in the leaf. And then these clusters of yellow flowers, there's a lot of buds, and then there usually is only one flower open at a time. Plant is slightly hairy too, which is another giveaway. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears. We're going to stay with plants for another slide. And you might think we're going to be having a ball, but actually we're going to have a gall. Chris Madsen, I have to thank you for this photo. This was spotted in a conifer out in the Caneville Cemetery, which, by the way, is a great place to look for a lot of unusual birds that show up there too. I think the conifers that are there, I know there were evening grosbeaks that were there. The pine siskins are there. You can sometimes see red-breasted nuthatches there. I think those conifers kind of attract some of those more unusual birds in this area. But Chris spotted this, and he sent it actually a few weeks ago. When I first looked at it, I thought, is that a swarm of honeybees? And then I got a better look at it. I forget if I took my glasses on or put them on or took them off. I can't remember if I had contacts on or whatever, but once I got a better look at it, I saw, no, that is all plant material. So I sent it to a couple of friends who are arborists, and they both said, oh yeah, that's weird. We see, weird things like that sometimes. They did say it was probably some kind of a gall, but that's really not telling us a whole lot. Galls are defensive structures that plants make to kind of save themselves. In science speak, they say that at the colonization site of a foreign entity, plant cells alter their trajectory of growth and development. It just means the plant develops some kind of weird growth in response to an insult, whether it's from a virus or bacteria, protozoa, chromista, different type of fungi. Parasitic plants like mistletoe can cause the host plant to grow strangely. Rotifers and nematodes, other insects and mites. Lots of things can spur strange growths. This one here in the center of this diagram, witch's broom on trees and shrubs, I kind of wonder if that ball that you saw, Chris, was a conifer response, like a witch's broom, which, by the way, those are called that because a lot of times, like in willows and mulberries, sycamore, the branches, the twig growth is altered to the point where it looks kind of like a ratty looking broom, kind of like what's illustrated here. And look at all the different things that can cause witch's broom: a virus, a fungus, bacteria, parasites, mites, insects, all different kinds of things. So we haven't gotten to the bottom of this insect gall mystery yet. I'm sorry, plant gall mystery yet, but I'm kind of wondering if it might be some sort of insect. If we get more information, we'll certainly pass that along. But for right now, it is a cool curiosity. As you're looking at the way trees grow, test yourself and see if you can notice some of these other things too, like say the witch's broom or some of these other ball-like structures that we see growing in trees. Fascinating, and I think there's a lot more that we don't know than what we do know. So very interesting area of study if you know of anybody who's looking into going into plant physiology. So now we're going to switch gears completely, and we're going to go out to the water, and we're going to take a little look at white pelicans. There's still some in the area. There were some spotted by Duck Island, which is the island just north of the dam in downtown Batavia. That's what some of us call Purple Loosestrife Island because of the way that plant kind of takes over in the summertime. But this is a photo that was taken by Pat and Art Meyerdirk. They were out in Oregon about a week and a half ago, and they saw just a whole bunch of white pelicans there. I actually saw a whole bunch of white pelicans in Oregon, Illinois in the middle of summertime, which kind of makes me wonder if they're breeding in that area. Someone else has said that they are also breeding along the Illinois River. In general, though, these birds, they fly through our area and they stop here for a little bit, but they actually want to keep pushing to the northwest. They go to the prairie pothole region of the Great Plains and the northern Great Plains in southern Canada. And they breed in the prairie wetland areas out there. When they're coming through in the springtime, they've got this bump on the bill, the breeding bump. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, well, if we have white pelicans here, do we have brown pelicans? Well, we actually don't. There's a difference, and this video is going to show it pretty well. When a brown pelican, now both of them are fish eaters, but when a brown pelican goes for food, it dives into the water from up high. And so it needs deeper water in order to be able to do that. The white pelican has this sort of foraging technique. They sort of herd the fish around. This was from Kathy Flynn. Kathy lives north of town here. This was at a development called the Reserve that's just north of St. Charles North High School. And a whole bunch of pelicans landed in one of the ponds there in this neighborhood. And Kathy was able to catch some great video of them moving around, filling their bills with the fish that are in those ponds. You can notice that they're sort of moving in sequence. They do that to sort of get these schools of fish together. They kind of herd the fish together into a group, and then they use their bills to scoop them up. Kathy, I loved what you said when you said that it reminded you of the flamingos dancing in the new version of Fantasia. So I actually added a little music to this. Let's watch again. And okay, you get the idea. A little bit of synchronized swimming. I'm always going to think about that now every time I see them as they're working in tandem or in groups in order to be able to get those fish pushed together, and they can successfully forage a whole billful. Pretty cool. So not too much longer that we'll be seeing them pushing through because they are heading the way north, but there are still a few flocks coming through. Keep an eye open for them. Now, this is another somewhat limited time engagement. Laura McKinsey, thank you so much for your photo. This was, I believe you said, one of your favorite wildflowers. These are popping up all over. Trillium grandiflorum is not quite as common as its cousin here, Trillium recurvatum. Now, I don't mean to be all like scientific on you. It's the large flowered Trillium, to me, is a bigger mouthful than grandiflorum. Trillium recurvatum has so many different names. I just say that because it's easier to say for me than wake robin, or what some people call them, the bloody nose. You can see how it got that name by the color of the blossom here. But what the two plants share is the tri part of their name. They've got 3 petals to their flowers. They've got 3 sepals. That's the structure underneath the petals. And then they've got 3 leaves as well. So the grandiflorum is quite a bit larger and just a little bit more unusual in this area. There's some growing out in Elburn. Mike Tillman, you shot this photo recently. You can see though here they're sprinkled in with some other wildflowers, most notably our May-apples that are looking just a little bit thirsty. We're going to talk about that in a minute too. Now this is a flower that is very attractive to deer. I know up at Tecawitha Woods, up in Valley View, there used to be huge stands of white trillium in the ravines there, and those have kind of disappeared over time as the deer population has increased. Now, trillium, oftentimes when you see a few, you'll see a lot. That is usually an indication that there's a healthy ant population in the area because the seed of the white trillium is transported by ants. They find the little fleshy structure of the elizome on the seed to be very attractive. It's tasty, it's got some fat, it's got some protein, it's got some sugar. They don't eat the seed itself though. So you'll see these stands of white trillium thanks to the ants. But then sometimes you'll come across a new grandiflorum and it's not near any other ones. Those that flower, chances are the seeds were consumed by deer. A deer can transport seeds a lot farther than an ant can. So deer are often recognized as not only consumers of the flowers, but also consumers of the seeds and an animal that can actually help spread the white trillium around. So keep that in mind if you just come across one or two. It could be it was the forestry or the husbandry work of a deer. Now, this is a video that I made, oh gosh, this was over a month ago. It was well before the purple martins actually. This is a birdhouse. If you walk along the trail that goes between Bennett Park and Riverside Park, Bennett Park in Geneva and Riverside in St. Charles, you might recognize this stretch. There's some lovely houses along there. There's some boats, there's deck chairs, things like that. And there's also this purple martin house. Well, I saw this purple martin here and I thought, oh man, that is so cool. He's back. So there's actually a couple of them on this house. These are, I've got to say, some of the best purple martin decoys I've ever seen. Kathy Andrini, thanks for letting me know that these aren't actual birds. I took this video thinking, oh, the thing is just flown up here from South Dakota. It's sorry, from South America. It's probably exhausted. Well, no, it's probably fake, but it's a great decoy. The good news, and I have not been back to this house to see if there are actual purple martins living in it, but the purple martins at Hickory Knolls are back. I heard this one bubbling sound when I was there the other day. They have this kind of liquid quality to the song, and they're chattering constantly as they're up in the sky. These are true insectivores. I don't think they eat any plant material at all, any berries or anything, and they spend much of their day flying around. And that happy little burbling sound, it's going to greet you now if you head out to Hickory Knolls anytime between now and say end of July, early August. They are one of our first birds to leave. They raise a brood and then they get out of here because they do go back down to South America, around Brazil. So they've got quite a distance that they come up and then they fly back towards. So check them out while they're here, or go check out the decoy if you miss them, because this guy's here year round. So now this is something I came across. This is one of the reasons, those of you who know that I tend to run a little bit late, this is one of the reasons why I find stuff like this all the time. And I think it is so fascinating. This is an ant war. These are pavement ants. And this was a sidewalk I saw when I was walking to work, and there was just this big cluster of ants. I made this, again, this was a day I can't remember if I had my glasses on or if I had my contacts in and I needed my reading glasses, but I took what amounted to about a minute of video, but most of it was blurry. So I just cut it out to the point where you could see the motion that was in focus. Even now that I'm looking at it here, it is kind of blurry, but we'll see there's a lot of kind of mandible to mandible contact going on here. This is a territory war. These are pavement ants. You can tell from the species name, immigrants, they've been transported throughout the world. They're a European species, but there are colonies of these ants pretty much any place that humans have landed. They've brought these ants with them. They actually favor places of sparse habitat, places like sidewalks, hence the common name pavement ant. I could tell that this was a fight and not a new colony starting, because I looked at each of these ants and I didn't see any with wings. If you see an ant with wings, it's not a particular species. Most ant species go through, there's a generation that forms wings and then they fly off and start new colonies. There'll be a queen, she needs to mate and then start her own colony. They actually will pluck those wings off once they're in their new home ground. So there weren't any winged individuals here. And there wasn't any food present. So that's what led me to conclude that this was indeed a border war. These nests, see how blurry this was? This is when I didn't have my glasses on. So these nests are pretty large, over a meter to nearly 5 square meters in size, and they can go down 90 centimeters. If you think of a centimeter as approximately a half an inch, 90 centimeters is approximately 45 inches. So that's pretty deep. That's close to 4 feet down, up to 10,000 workers per colony. And they are very territorial. Sometimes there'll be 2 colonies that are near each other. And when the workers go out to forage, they'll keep running into each other. That can spark a territory battle. Sometimes it happens as these colonies are growing. One will spread to the point where it encounters a second one, and they'll go to war to see who's going to get to claim the new turf. This was the scene over at the other end of the sidewalk, just a few ants over here. So I think this was the original colony, and it left to go do battle with the new colony over on the other side of the sidewalk. But this is something that these ants were living below the ground until, I would say, the last maybe week to 10 days. And you might also remember we talked about ground bees recently. Sometimes it can be hard to tell if you're looking at a pile of dirt from an ant or from a ground bee. Usually the hole is going to be a little bit larger. If you see a hole size that's about as big around as a pencil, or maybe even slightly larger than that, you're looking at a ground bee. If you're looking at a smaller, much smaller hole, chances are you're looking at a ant colony. Now, also with pavement ants, they tend to be right in the crack of a sidewalk. Not too many ground bees are going to choose to nest there. So keep your eyes open. You might see a ant war of your own. Now, what you might see in a few weeks here is this. These are the ants that will, they feed on all kinds of things. They feed on other insects, which I took this last summer. This was a cicada that didn't make it. In fact, it didn't even get a chance to harden up. This insect had climbed out. Its wings had started to extend. It had come up out of the ground. Its wings were filling with fluid, and then something happened, because this green color shows that it didn't have a chance to fully harden up before it fell off the tree and immediately was swooped down upon by these ants. So they eat insects, they'll eat sugary foods. There is another ant that sometimes goes by the name of sugar ant, but then sometimes people call these sugar ants if they see them eating like spilled ice cream or something. But they'll also feed on the honeydew that drips from aphids in trees. They'll feed on protein, other protein sources like plant-based proteins like nuts. They have a very, very broad diet, but they are almost exclusively found around pavement, the pavement ant. So yes, it is really dry out. It is to the point where we are considered normally dry. Now this look now is almost a week old. I believe they'll update it again this coming Thursday, but there you can see over DuPage and in Cook County, Lake County, part of McHenry is actually considered to be in a moderate drought. We could sure use some rain. I had my hopes up that what came yesterday, they were forecasting some storms. I was hoping the rainfall totals would be significant or at least decent, but no, we are definitely experiencing some dry weather. I think over the next few days, there's also rain in the forecast, but the totals look to be under 1/10 of an inch. So we'll just keep an eye on things and see if this will continue. Not really too much we can do about it, but we can observe the effects. It's present in a lot of different things. Those the picture that Mike Tillman shared with us of the trillium growing amongst the May apples. The May apples just looked kind of sad, kind of droopy. This is a little morel I found. I was really excited that I found them, but look at it almost looks like the dried version of morels that you would buy, 3 months from now, and that you would have to rehydrate before you use it. Just things are really, really dry. Now this is a little, speaking of dry, this is a little dry humor. I know we've got some turtle fans in the audience. This just cracked me up. This is my box turtle, Arthur, and he was, I had my tablet sitting on the floor. I was watching the Flintstones the other day. Turns out Artie and I, who have been together since Columbus Day of 1978, we have yet another thing in common, something I didn't even know. He likes the Flintstones as much as I do. Actually, he liked the motion. He was when Fred and Barney were running, he was actually biting at their heels. It was kind of cute. Anyway, that's going to wrap up tonight's program. We've got lots of things on deck for next week. Six-spotted tiger beetles, they are starting to emerge. We've got a spot out at Hickory Knolls where the larvae actually dig into the substrate and overwinter, and then they emerge in the springtime. I was lucky enough to catch that about a week and a half ago. Going to take a look at some cool millipedes that we have in this area. Going to give you an update on what birds are starting to show up as spring migration continues. You never know what's going to end up in the old email inbox. And I'm sure between what's going on in our natural areas and what our restoration crew is up to, we'll probably have more updates for you there as well. So with that, I'm going to end the screen share. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Does anybody have any questions or comments, announcements?
How close are hummingbirds?
Some people are starting to see them, Chris. Miss Bonnie, you're out in Newark, Illinois, and Bonnie had a hummingbird just a day or two ago. So they're they're here. They're getting here, Chris, any minute now. Well, actually give them till tomorrow. They don't like to fly at night, but
I'll put my feeders out.
yeah. Okay, and down in Batavia, Sarah reports that they've had some there as well. So, yep, 'tis the season.
Hey, Pam, with the redheaded woodpeckers, we used
Yeah,
to
hey, Lauren.
see them a lot, not for several years, not for at least 5 years, at Delnor
Oh.
Woods. They would even come to that shagbark hickory by the pavilion there. The 3-year-olds would love them, but we haven't seen them there for quite a while. But I was wondering, I was just out at Coron Farm, and
Mhm.
they've got quite a lot of the oaks. And I was wondering if, is anyone spotted them there, or they would, that seems like a place that might become ideal, for them.
It, oh, Mr. Doer, do you have a comment?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Oh, don't you hate that? We were talking about redheaded woodpeckers. And Laura was wondering if maybe Coron Farm.
Well, yeah, I think it would be. It's the edges there are pretty good, as well as gray willows.
Gray willows too, yeah. That openness, and I wonder, so they're doing a lot of cutting right now at Delnor to open those woods back up again.
Yeah.
And I think we had, again, there's so many trails going through those woods that I know we had some really dead branches that had to be cut down for safety reasons, but I really think that the dead part of the tree, trees with dead parts in them, is very attractive too. And those are just really hard to find. Oh, that's right. Wallace had let me know that there were, and Wallace is out west of town, that there were redheaded woodpeckers on her property as well. And I heard there was a couple off of Crane Road. Now, will they stick around? Oh gosh, and a quick visit from a scarlet tanager. All right, well, we'll be talking about those next week too. That's awesome.
Oh, I sent you a note when you were talking about the lithospermum. It's not an ephemeral. It'll last all summer.
Well, there we go. That's why it's not in our ephemeral guide, huh?
That's right. As well, and it's one of the noted species of Norris Woods. When I took a flight swink out there in the mid 60s, he had all kinds of county records came out of Norris Woods at that time, and it was because it's such a it's such a remnant. It was never really it was used for human recreation. It wasn't really used for animals and such. So it's a lot of good things.
Well, Ryan had mentioned that that plant was in other parts of Norris, but
Yes,
this part that's
it's all
right
over.
along the trail
No, it's scattered all throughout.
was.
And it's found at different places. It's out Campton Forest Preserve, the Fabian Forest. It's scattered, but as you pointed out, it's not very showy. And so
John, I swear it looks like something I would have yanked out of my own yard. It doesn't seem to be, something about the fleshy, the hairs on the stem. It just sort of looks almost like something that was introduced, but we learned a lot about it this past week.
right.
New. Well, we'll keep watching for it. I'm anxious to see what those seeds look like. Do you know, John, does anything, is that seed attractive to anything?
It may be an ant like thing. I don't know if there's an arrow on it or not.
Okay.
I have to look into that.
The
I have the arrow.
references that I was able to find, well, and in fact, that common name Stoneseed,
Yeah.
it's got a really, really hard covering on it. So I didn't know if it would be something that, you know, an herbivore would find attractive, or a bird. And it seems like the sort of thing that would be at an insect, you know, it would fall off and an insect would carry it away. But I don't know, it seemed, all the references just talked about it being very hard.
Looking up something.
No, go ahead.
You know, that's great. No. John, I may have told you this, and I wished I had done a screenshot of it. There was a picture of a young botanist named John Doerr on his hands and knees at what was then Jones Woods, right when it was making the transition, and you were out identifying. It was in the Tribune.
Oh, yeah.
So your hard work was appreciated even then.
Many, many years ago, I think.
Anybody else have anything they'd care to share? Any observations?
We saw a summer tanager
Summer tanager too,
in
awesome.
our yard.
Oh,
It was like a half an hour wonder. It went. Haven't seen it since.
wow. Well, something else to put on the radar then. I know several people have been seeing orioles too, and are welcoming them back as well. Both Orchard and Baltimore Orioles are back.
We saw a bunch of Baltimore Orioles at Les Errands, but then, and we had one at our yard, but we haven't seen very many since, just onesie twosies.
Okay. I know with this extended dry spell that we've been having, it seems like it's really, although we are having the cool weather too, which is nice. You know, when we had that drought in 2012, it was dry and it also got hot real quick. So a lot of these spring flowers and they just didn't last long, but at least we've got the cooler temperatures to balance it out now. Anybody else have anything they'd care to share? If not, very much appreciate you all signing in, and you all successfully navigated our new sign-up system. We've got, we'll be sticking with that for at least the next few months. I think the Park District, ever since they started looking at all the different options that came about, I think as a result of the pandemic and all these new and different ways we're trying with programming, they're finding there's lots of different ways of getting people to sign up for things. So we are continually working on, you know, can we do this program without sign up? Can we just have a certain time that you just, you know, tune in? So far, they want us to be tracking enrollment. So if you can share it with a friend, appreciate that too. Maybe we can get our numbers up to where we can have an official sponsor and make this an official show. In the meantime, have a great week, everybody. And I'll see you back hopefully next Tuesday.
Thanks, Pam. It was good to see you again.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pam.
See you soon, Kay.